Sullivan. She is stuck in traffic over in the Blakeney-Ballantyne area. We'll get here as soon as possible. So we're going to start with the discussion of RFP responses first, and then we will move into the capital improvement policy and draft capital improvement plan. So without further ado, Mr. Curt White.
And was Charlie?
He's probably stuck in the same traffic. So
He was going to potentially provide some helpful feedback for this portion as well. So, but that works.
Curt, you just gotta, come on, do this in front of the, stretch it out. Here we go.
Right. All right. Well, good afternoon.
Speak slowly.
So really, we've met over the past month or so in the 2x2 meetings to try to get some more questions answered about the two proposals that the board kind of narrowed it down to in the last work session at August 27th, and we there was some questions that came up throughout. I'm prepared to answer some of the ones that the board had brought up during that meeting, but overall it seems like everyone was in agreement that the New East proposal was the direction, the vision that the board wanted to go in. And so if that's the case,
Why don't you articulate what that was for people that are watching on YouTube? Just
sure. So the New East proposal would provide, it would purchase the Niven Price building from the town and put in a mix of retail / restaurant and office uses and upfit that building. It would add a new mixed-use retail and office building at the corner of the vacant parcel at the corner of West North Main Street and North Broome Street. And that building would be approximately 14,000 square feet with retail on the bottom and offices on the top 2 levels. It would add a residential mixed-use building along North Broome Street with approximately 20 residential units. Those would only be upper floor residential. I did confirm that was a question that came up in the conversations with the board. They're not talking about residential on the ground floor. It would be retail on the bottom, residential on top. And the town would retain ownership of the Niven Price parking lot, but with some dedication of a shared use agreement for parking spaces with the developer. And they would also add a retail outparcel building at the back of that lot. Then the public portion of the project would, according to to New East's proposal, the town would provide infrastructure and services to support the development, talking about sidewalk improvements on West North Main Street, sidewalk improvements on North Church Street, and we would also support them by working towards historic landmark status for the Niven Price building, and so those are the high-level pieces of the proposed partnership there.
their negotiating points.
Their negotiating points, and so there's flexibility in that. I think that the important thing is. And in our discussions with Charlie, the first step is for the board to choose the vision. Do you want to go the New East route, which is what I just described, or the Sherwood Development Group route, which is the smaller project in scope that addresses just the Niven Price building itself and does not include the other parcel on the corner. And so once you choose a vision, then from there you would really negotiate the nitty-gritty of the development in terms of how much exactly is the developer's portion, what's the town's portion, what specific improvements are being done. As another timeline is another one, because we know we have to consider events. For example, Parks and Rec has a concern. That's a priority for Parks and Recs to ensure that we still have adequate space for that to happen. But really, that the first step is just to select that vision, and then you go on from there. The developer New East, they're flexible with as much as they can be, at least from initial conversations with them. For example, they're flexible on timeline. They're flexible on the retail or on the residential versus retail office component of that building A2, as in the diagram, A2 being the one behind along North Broome Street. When I talked with them about it, they said, we're not set on it being residential. It's not a make or break for the project, but they did want to for there to be an understanding that it's much easier to get it's much easier to get residential financed. So it would probably make the project have a longer timeline if you eliminated the residential portion, because for them to get financing for office, they've got to pre-lease 50% of it. Now, of course, they've thrown out we're not just throwing it out, it's in their proposal that they have they've made it clear that they would entertain an agreement from the town to be that tenant, to be the office tenant in that building. So that would go ahead and take care of their financing, that financing concern. But that's just something they wanted to make sure we did understand, that if we did start working on that use change, it could just affect the project timeline. We went over the appraisal. The corner lot appraised for $590,000. The Niven Price building appraised for $1.25 million. So the total is $1.84 million. And so there's a spread there between what they had initially offered and what the property is appraised for of $602,000. We have to get fair market value for the properties, but then how we actually go about structuring the partnership is where there's room there for New East to still be able to make the give exactly. So perhaps it's the town's contributing back to the development project in other ways after that. So that was a point about the appraisal.
So you met informally with each of the board members.
Right.
Do you care to comment on the consensus? Did you see a consensus, a pattern come back?
Yes, the pattern that I observed unanimously was that New East was the vision that the board wanted to go in. There were those questions around it with regard to the residential piece, with regard to the appraisal amount, and those kind of things. But the direction and the vision was New East as far as I was able to get that.
So with that, do we need to take a formal action on that? I know we had talked about perhaps October 8th, but if we give you that direction, maybe that's for Charlie, but it sounds like we're ready to give direction on that particular company, then go from there. Do you need formal action from us to enter into negotiation with them? Yeah.
You're ready to do that.
I have a question. So you're saying if we choose this, then the office versus apartments are still negotiable with the developer?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Westlake, do you have questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
No.
How was traffic? Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's nice to do it at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a work session, so it would be inappropriate to take action. We just reached consensus, so perhaps we can add that to the agenda tonight. Just take some. We'll add to take action to direct the town manager, the attorney, and the Main Street manager to further the negotiations. That's okay with everybody?
Okay.
Melody, will you make sure I don't forget that when we get to that point
Yes.
tonight? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right?
Thank you very much.
Kurt. Okay, next up, capital improvement, policy and draft capital improvement plan.
Sir, Mayor and Board, let's see, we got this. There we go. Thanks. I apologize for not getting this out to you ahead of time because I made the promise we'd try to get you all the information out ahead of the board meeting. But we're not really asking you to take any formal action on this. But, you know, I consider this really a starting point for the board. It's I'm probably giving you more information than you want or intended for me to give you, but I'm just trying to do it in a context of what's in the best interest, that I believe, in Waxhaw as we go forward. It'll lead to a lot of discussion later, and especially as you start to prepare the groundwork for the fiscal year 21 budget, doing that. You're doing a lot of projects now, and I'll highlight some of those that you've worked on or completed or they're out, they're actually worked on now. And I'll reiterate several times that you'll always have more projects than you have money. And these are not inexpensive projects, especially when you're talking about transportation with that. So to give you a little outline, I'm going to talk to you about the CIP policy first. It's really an internal policy, but if the board wants to take action on it next month, we certainly can do that and make it part of your dialogue with that. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail in there, but I will go through it briefly with you, that. And like I said, you can approve it later. I'll give you several lists. There's 3 forms that Tammy provided you of the CIP. One is a complete project list that you have to have good eyes to see on ledger paper that has all the phasing and everything. Then there's alphabetical listing, and then there's a priority listing coming for you. I'll talk to you a little bit about challenges and opportunities. Again, you'll always have more projects than you'll have money. Opportunities, such in the form of grants, partnerships, and other things that you'll have going forward, CRTPO, especially with your transportation through that. But it's really a 2-year, and then I'll give you the recommendation, really for a 2-year process. Much longer time frame is going to require a lot more discussion, and a lot more the town will have to prepare for as you go forward through that. But really trying to identify what you have committed, what are important right now, and what needs to be done, and developing a plan as you move forward. So let's talk about the policy. You have it in front of you. With that, it's just a highlight. We'll go through it, and these are some of the highlights in there, but I'll go through it. And it really talks about what's in a CIP. You know, CIP items are usually items that you're going to finance, usually items that you're going to acquire that have a value of over $50,000. Maybe renovation or construction projects as well. And then you're going to have ongoing projects such as for maintenance projects, and that would be more in your PAL bill as you go forward. It talks a little bit about the difference between what's a regular budget item and a capital item. So you can see the differences in there. You obviously don't want to go out for financing on things like computers and desk and operating things. Police cars are not typically in your capital improvement item. Large equipment purchases maybe so, but their police and department vehicles are typically handled through your ongoing budget process, so they wouldn't be necessarily included in your capital improvement plan unless you're doing maybe a large-scale purchase at some point. The capital items sometimes have impact on regular budget items, especially if you're building new parks or new facilities or new building, things like that. You look for an increased operating costs, whether it's through utilities or personnel. So another part of this would be some kind of personnel budget to go along with that, so you can anticipate the additional need for increasing in your regular operating budget if you move forward. Next, it talks about operational issues, and this is really where it describes the relationship between the department heads, the town manager, and then the board, and what the roles and responsibilities is. Obviously, the department heads are in charge of trying to get the project together, documenting those, identifying those projects, and then the city manager along with or town manager along with the finance director would work on that with the departments to make sure it's all inclusive. And then this does propose having a capital improvement, a capital project selection committee to evaluate projects as you move forward. And that certainly can be expanded as you go forward or reduced or whatever as it goes forward. And then it talks about the board review and recommendation and ultimately adoption of a CIP. And even though you're adopting a CIP, you're not spending any money. So let's make that clear right off the bat. It doesn't authorize any money for projects. All those projects will still have to come back before Board of Commissioners for approval, for authorization to move forward, for a project ordinance or a transfer to a line item for the departments to spend the money. It talks about evaluation of projects and really just trying to figure out how to program those expenditures within the budget cycle as you move forward down these 5-year periods. And you will constantly have more projects and you'll have money. Some projects will move ahead because you have an opportunity. Some projects will fall behind because it's just not a high priority, but it's all ultimately up to the board. We talk a lot about the funding sources in the document, in the policy. Two things that you could look at are, of course, the general obligation bonds, which is most common to how you handle capital improvements, which require votes of the people to make those expenditures, but it gives you a much longer time frame in which to spend the money. There is a special assessment option in there. For example, special assessments could be in the future if you do a downtown municipal service district or some other type of municipal service district. You can apply the funds collected there for a specific purpose for downtown improvements, for example, a parking deck, more sidewalks, whatever it may come up. Revenue bonds, special obligation bonds, probably not so much through that. And I know you've talked a lot about this with Davenport and Associates in the spring, so I'm probably being a little bit redundant, but it's definitely in the policy. And lastly, we kind of talk about debt limits, the things that are limited under general statutes and required that you can't do, and then a policy that you don't exceed 15% of the general fund operating budget for each year with GO bond debt. And then lastly, it talks about evaluation of projects. Projects will always come in higher. You might have some unforeseen expenditures. If you're building a building, then the soils turn out to be bad. You may have to have a soil allowance, or you have other costs that go up, fuel, materials, et cetera, that always inflate the cost of that and even the economy. So it gives you an opportunity to analyze and examine why those things either came in over budget, or if you're lucky enough, occasionally, why did it come in under budget? Did we do a poor job of estimating the cost, or what was the reason we had the overestimation? So that's really in the policy, and I know you're probably just seeing it for the first time, so just take it home and come up with your questions. If you have anything, email me with regards to that, and we can talk about it further. And like I said, it's intended to be an internal document, but if the board wants to adopt it, we certainly can do that at another board meeting in October. Okay, now we get to the handouts, the master list, and like I said, you do have two CIP master lists. One is the big one that's alphabetized that talks about different phasing and things like that, and then there's another one that I believe is still the green, that's also an alphabetized list that talks about the CIP projects in a much easier format to read with that. And you can see the total numbers there being like $40 million worth of projects. when we get into the sort of the CIP master list, priority list, I've got them sort of broken out in recreation, transportation, and in other projects. And these are your recreation projects on a priority. And basically, you're committed to the Waxhaw fields. You have a highly used Nesbitt Fields for athletics. Town Creek Park's highly used. So those are really your top three priorities, and the rest of them kind of fit in and fall back through there. The reason I put in other things in the Waxhaw Fields is because I think we have a good opportunity, or Waxhaw has a good opportunity for a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant for that facility. But we also get more points for the more things you have in there. Athletic fields are one thing, but we've talked about maybe doing a trail around that facility, connecting the bridge between the Y property and the fields, and maybe even a splash pad. So you may include all that within that project and design, and then construction documents, and then you bid it as alternates and different things like that, so you can pick and choose as you come through there, through that. You see the barns downtown and the community center all downtown with what Curt just talked about. As that project moves forward, you're going to lose that civic open space, part of that civic open space that you have, so you're looking at opportunities to replace that. And is barns an alternative for that, or is there another location? Those are all decisions that ultimately you'll have to come back and talk about. We get to transportation. These are multiple intersection improvements that you have, and as always, a lot of these are going to be state roads, and you're going to have to make the decision at some point in time: do you take town money and actually help to make the state road intersections better? CRTPO will probably help with some of that as they go through their priority for critical intersection analysis, things like that. The number 7 in there is the sidewalk priority. I think that one becomes clearer as you do your comprehensive transportation plan, as you incorporate that into the bike and pedestrian plan, greenway plan. And you also have some opportunity for funding through CRTPO with that.
Erskine, I have a
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
Sorry. So regarding the Waxhaw Marvin Gray Byram stoplight, do we not already have some funds set aside for that project? I believe that we did, because we had one of the developers contribute funds to that project. So,
Matt behind me.
yeah, he's there.
So,
There are funds available that haven't been earmarked specifically for that project. Part of the funds were used to add to the high hazard project that NCDOT is doing on 16 at that intersection on that street. And so we provided funds to put the stoplight in addition to the turn lanes they're going to put in. But there is money reserved that hasn't been earmarked for a particular project. Certainly it could go to that. I also see sidewalk along Millbridge Phase 5 as a viable opportunity for those funds as well.
Okay, so I'm specifically referencing the funds from Landover that,
Right.
and it was approximately $500,000,
Yeah,
I
it's
believe?
down 450 minus the street light, stoplight addition that we provided for at 16.
Okay, but I wanted to make sure that's such a critical intersection, and we get questioned on Waxhaw, Marvin, and Gray Byram, I'm sorry, more so Gray Byram and Providence Road, very often, and we have the funds set aside for Providence Road and Gray Byram, right?
Yeah, that project is in construction programming
Okay.
through
Right.
DOT. They just got stuck in right-of-way acquisition.
So this is specifically, we have funds also set aside that we can use for Waxhaw, Marvin, and Gray Byram itself.
Yeah, and so these are basically just a list of the projects we already know have to be done in terms of need, have some cost estimates provided, but as far as really getting into the details of the funding, there's a call for projects next month for CRTPO, and I'm throwing all of them in there.
Okay.
And so it's such a living document, it's really difficult to be able to say what should go where and what amount of money. It's just kind of a real high-level beginning here.
So there's a possibility then that we could CRTPO could grant us additional funds?
CRTPO, that would be the first ask at any given
Right.
project level. Again, the critical intersection analysis the county is doing has a number of intersections that overlap this. They've got an RFQ out where design services are going to be done, and the more work you do up front, the better your project scores when you do apply. So those projects through the CIA wouldn't come to CRTPO until next year, but they'd be a leg above the rest. We're taking our opportunity now to submit them because we don't want to miss an opportunity.
Right.
It's really unsure where they'll fall, but that will start to fill in the information that currently we're just lacking.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize a couple things here. One, we got to pay to play on the state roads. They've made that very clear. They don't have enough money to come out and just fund the mass improvement of all the state roads unencumbered. So we're going to have to, if we want things, to Matt's point, the fact that we've got engineering done helps bring that score up. The fact that we're willing to contribute will bring the score up. The other part of it that Matt will guide this board and future boards through is recognize that when you tie it to CRTPO and the funds there, you've got federal and state funds which elongate the time that anything gets done. Kensington's a good example. We're 4 years into that. So if we deem, or the future boards deem, that an intersection needs work, that's going to come back to the board and say, okay, do we want to fix this and do we want to fix this now? The other thing that I'll say is, correct me if I'm wrong, but at Waxhaw, Marvin, and Gray Byram, didn't the developer add a turn lane? And didn't they address some things there? Yeah. So there have been some improvements
Right.
there. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And so, I mean, the best case scenario is that our funds are used as matching opportunities through the CRTPO. The worst case is, if that doesn't come to fruition, then we pick and choose one project that
Right.
rises above the rest, and we put more money there, and they fall back in line.
A good example is Pine Oak.
Right.
DOT is not going to,
They're not going to touch that.
Touch that
It's
one.
probably not going to score highly at all. The fact that the bridge project is on hold gives us time to
Right.
kind of see where these fall out,
Yep.
and be able to come back to it again, because all of these things could change based on new information from the state and through the CIA in the near future.
now the good news is they're moving the utilities at Kensington and Waxhaw Marvin. That project is now started, so that was nice to see that work begin.
Agreed.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Matt.
Matt? And then we've got some other projects, police, body cameras would be one, public works facility, ultimately a new town hall. And then, like I said, the ongoing yearly maintenance for Powell Bill. Like I said, there are a lot of projects that you have underway or in some portion being completed, and you see the list there on that one, the skate park, the Town Creek Park, Kensington intersection that Matt just talked about and we just alluded to, the TAP grant, and then the Waxhaw Fields that you do have spent money to do some of the design work there, and then of course the sidewalk on Waxhaw Marvin that's imminent with regard to that. So the CIP prioritized list is your ones with the blue. And you say, well, how did you come up with this prioritized list? Well, here's my version of why. You've made commitments, and those commitments need to be adhered to, or else we're going to have to go out and renegotiate those commitments. You have immediate needs. The public works facility is an immediate need, in my opinion. Safety always comes first in a lot of these projects, and that's where a lot of the transportation comes into effect. do that. And then lastly, I've always found it's better to try to finish a project than start another one. I'd much rather get it done and be through with it and have it complete before you start another one, or you end up with a project that just drags on for years. And you mentioned transportation projects. I'll tell you, in Mooresville, they passed a general obligation bond, and they awarded the projects to do intersections with the DOT, and going through all the red tape that you mentioned, the federal guidelines and everything in there. And plus, along the way, we did get some developer money on some of those intersections, so that also helped. But it does take a long time. They're just now sticking the shovel in the ground on the majority of those projects that we started in Mooresville in 2014. They're just starting right now, so that's 5 years going forward. So it's going to take a long time. So let's talk about the public works facility, public service facility. You still haven't really decided where you want that facility to be, so that needs to be a discussion with that. But to get started, we think that, or I think you really need to begin some sort of selection of a design firm and try to work on some kind of design so you'll know exactly what you're getting. So when you decide to put that facility on a piece of property, you'll be ready to go. And this is I put in $2 million. I know that's probably a little bit high based on what Todd was telling me, and then I just use a 10% for construction, design and construction to go forward.
So your recommendation is to begin soon on some design phase of this to try to get to
Right.
what that really means, and do we have the so we can select the right property?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Let's see, I went too far, I think, or I'm missing a slide. Maybe it's after this one. There we go. All right, I'll just briefly talk about road maintenance and PAL bill. This is a separate line item in the CIP. You know, will you use some PAL bill funds to maybe do some of these transportation projects, to assign a little bit of money to it? Yeah, but primarily you're going to use PAL bill funds to do resurfacing, to do repairs, to do seal work, different things like that. I got out of line, but anyway. Okay, the Waxhaw Y fields would be a next priority. You've got a commitment and you have an agreement with the Y to do that. Again, I think you've got a strong case for a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, but we need authority now that we're going to move forward with that so Dina can start working, because it's going to take time to do that application. A big part of that application was the adoption of Park Recreation Master Plan. You completed that. That's a big checkbox on that grant. As I mentioned, other amenities that you have in that park will increase that. There has to be a trade-off on how many amenities that you can have and what the cost is, and so you're still going to do that. But we need to go ahead and start finishing up the design with, I guess Little & Associates did the design? No, well, not Little. Yeah, Land Design did that. But so we need to be talking with them about going ahead and finishing up that design, working on a construction document to get that ahead with that. So the 3 design project would be the public services facility. Matt talked about the intersection of Waxhaw, Marvin, and Gray Byram, and then the Waxhaw Fields, and then 2 equipment purchases, that one being Public Works for a piece of equipment, and then first year of body cameras. Hopefully you'll get some grant money for the body cameras, but you never know, but at least it would be doing that, be focused on that. So what I want you to think about is the focus on the remainder of this budget year, from now, let's just say October 1st until June the 30th, and then the next budget year, July 1 to June 2021, going forward. So here it is. So you got the police body cameras, the Public Works skid piece of equipment, skid steer, the design of the Public Works facility, the Gray Byram intersection design, Waxhaw Y field design, for a total of $818,000.
I'll admit, what is a skid steer?
Yeah, Todd?
Okay, thank you.
Then for 2021 would be the other half of the police body cameras, construction of public services, construction of Gray Byron, and construction of Waxhaw Fields. $6.5 million. And you say the interim town manager's lost his mind. Probably. But here's how you pay for those projects. For the immediate design, for the immediate projects that I alluded to, the $818,000, you transfer that unassigned fund balance to a capital project ordinance for those projects. Or you transfer it to the department for them to begin, if you don't want to do a project ordinance for body cameras, for example, you just transfer the money to the police department for that purchase. The big money we talked about is about $7.3 million, and what I want you to be thinking about is borrowing or financing that over a 10, 15, could go 20-year period, and using the money that you have set aside, that you have historically set aside in the budget, $650,000, $700,000 in the budget every year to make a debt payment for that. After that, I don't see any way to accomplish $40 million worth of projects without some type of general obligation bond. And that gives you time to think about it. That gives you time to work on your ratings for Standard & Poor's and Moody's and all those people that you're going to need to do bonds, things like that, and trying to set aside some funds going forward. And I know Davenport, again, talked a lot about this with you in some of their discussions in the spring.
So
And here,
just a question, the phasing of 20 and 21, part of going to the LGC and getting money, we have to have the work in 20, all this design work done to show that we're ready to use the money that we borrow, right?
Right.
That's why you
you
phased
would
it that way?
have to have the LGC's gotten where they almost want bids in hand
Mhm.
before they do that. So you
Okay.
have to be thinking about it. So, timeline could move quite a bit for that. It may take place next year, but it may be later in next year. So everything kind of moves out
Mhm.
from that point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, how do you accomplish the projects? How do you do that? And again, this comes directly from the Davenport Associates, the debt capacity analysis that was done back in April for you. You're already making a debt payment, for example, for $650,000 that you've set aside in the budget, in this past year's budget, and they said that you could accomplish the debt in about $6 million, as long as you kept making that $650,000 contribution every year. They said if you wanted to raise tax a penny, you could increase your debt capacity. You could increase your debt payment to $850. 2 cents would get you almost $10 million worth of projects, almost $11 million worth of projects. I'm not advocating any of that. It's just, in context and food for thought as you get through that. There are a lot of factors in those things, the timing of the debt issuance that I talk about here, amortization term, interest rates seem to be falling, so it's not a bad time. The other part of the economy is booming, so everything's costing you far more than it should probably with that. But so it all factors into that capacity, and you can see that 1 cent on your property tax rate now raises about $209,000. So, challenges, again, you always have more money, more projects than money. Projects are always going to take longer than expected, and transportation is expensive. And you may have to decide, as we talked about earlier, that you're going to have to spend money on DOT roads because that's where your intersections are that are having a major traffic issue to have an impact. And if you do this, if you go through the capital improvement program, and you need to make a commitment to reaffirm that every year and with each board to confirm that it's your vision of what you want to get done. And so you just have to really, really keep at it moving forward. Opportunities, I think there are opportunities out there. We mentioned Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, the Clean Water Management Trust Fund, maybe some water quality with greenways and some other things that you could do. LWCF, the Land Water Conservation Fund, there's some funds, and there may be some other state and federal dollars that you can come up to. But there are a lot of private organizations, the Tony Hawk Foundation, for example, for skate parks. Kaboom does a lot of playground equipment purchases. Lowe's Charitable Foundation also has done some work in parks. Typically, they want to see a benefit for low, moderate income individuals or neighborhoods, those kind of things, or underserved neighborhoods. So that's another consideration. But there's some grants out there. CRTPO will be a big partner for transportation, as well as when developers come in and do things, private developer participation as part of their TIA and you've already experienced some of that with some of the developers going forward. I've made contributions to those projects as you get forward. Especially for parks, partnerships with Union County, the school system, the YMCA, civic clubs. You may even have a partnership with an HOA that turns out that you could, partner with them down the road. Schools, as they develop new schools, you may be able to partner with them for additional athletic fields, or you make a contribution to make a gym, a full-size gym, different things going forward. So what am I asking you to do really is take all this information, review all the CIP projects, think about what I talked about for a strategy for this year between October and June, and then think about as you prepare to go into your retreat, start talking about budget for next year, budget for the following years. Think about how you feel about issuance of debt, and just a constant reminder that you'll always have more money than you got. Always have more projects than you have money. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
So while we digest all this, your suggestion is sooner rather than later, probably with one of the next board meetings, the 818, move that in so staff can get working on the
Right.
5 projects there.
Yes, because if we are going to apply for a part of grant, we need to be finishing up the design, talking with our recreation specialists at the state, those kind of things. And then, and we need to start selecting design firms and to begin
Okay.
in that process.
Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
I'm looking at the blue page, on number 4, the splash pad,
Yes.
$715,000 for a splash pad. Where would this splash pad be located?
Well, that's still up in the air of where it would be. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, you could incorporate that if the Y was willing to incorporate that into their plans. You could partner with them to do a splash pad on their property and make it part of the part of grant application.
But if not, where would that possibly, Dina, do you? Okay.
Downtown would be.
I was wondering what the background on that was, but just my opinion, to spend $715,000 on a splash pad is ridiculous. As many things as Waxhaw needs. I'll just leave that there.
Is that something that you considered in partnership with Y, because it would add to, or be more helpful in getting a grant with more things that you put in that, to get that grant or funding? Did you partner with Y?
That's why I stuck it in with the Waxhaw Y fields, but you're exactly right. is that the best location? I don't know.
To be determined.
To be determined. Or is it something that even we want to consider? You know?
Considered other projects or other, activity type projects instead of the splash pad to add on, if we partnering, say, with Y, for example, that would also be helpful in adding to or for grant purposes.
The more amenities you have, your application gets more points for that, but there's got to be a break-even point, you know. You want to spend $715,000 for a splash pad and only get $500,000 and doesn't even cover the splash pad. So, but, you know, outdoor basketball, tennis courts, yeah, trail.
Yeah, I think the important thing there is there's a contractual obligation, concept done and approved within the next 9 months on both parties. So those are things that you'll be working out with the YMCA over the course between now and June 30th, 2020, whatever next.
2020,
Yeah.
yeah.
Other questions? Commissioner Westlake, Mayor Pro Tem, any additional questions? Commissioner Lee?
We are to come back to you with our input on this?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you have any questions?
Because ultimately, you'll
Huh?
approve the capital improvement plan at some point in time. Prior to your, you know, hopefully prior to your fiscal year 21 budget stuff. But as the mayor alluded to, you know, really concentrate on the things that you're committed to and that we can move ahead.
So really, the action plan is, for the board, we need to be thinking about 2020, fiscal year 20, the year we're in,
Right.
and in October, that 818.
Right.
So, because that dictates the future for this year. And then we have more time to look at some of these other projects for fiscal year 21. Obviously, the new board will take on that responsibility as well.
Right.
The other thing that you'd like input back on is if we have any questions on the capital improvement plan policy statements.
Yes, sir.
Any feedback on that as well, back directly to you. You want that via just an email?
That'd be great.
Okay.
All email 2x2, whatever works for you.
Okay.
folks.
And then, before we end, I want to say, first and foremost, thank you to you, to Tammy, and all the department heads. This has been something that we've been looking for a while, and this has got it in place, and I'll probably be the only one that says this, but thank you for getting it under 40 million, because the last time we looked at it, it was much larger. I think what you have here are some reasonable, thought-provoking ideas, and now we have to
Right.
prioritize.
Yeah, it is, because they'll always move and years will go, but as you said, Mayor, I really want to thank Tammy, and I know I was emailing her on her poor vacation, and then, you know, Matt in between things, and Dina, and so they did a lot of work in getting that together, and really want to thank them for that, and Lisa as well, for getting me to a comfort level, and even a 2-hour commute this morning, and I had to put off the meeting to finally finish up with that. I think we've got some good work, a good starting point, let me put it that way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to, well, I don't need to do that. We can just adjourn. Work session. Thank you very much, and we'll see everybody at 6:30. Great work. Thank you very much.